Yay, there we go. What's up,
There we
Evan? How
go.
you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Hanging in there. Hanging in there. I told you before, there's
Uh,
something weird going on with my throat. So I sound a little, maybe I sound even a little better than I normally
mm.
do. I don't know.
Yeah, you can do that kind of smoky Tom Waits kind of thing.
Yeah, Tom Waits is cool. Hang on, I got the, okay. I got like echo going on. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm out. That's better. I hate
Okay.
that. I always do that. Dang it, there's another browser somewhere with it open.
Yeah, exactly. You got two windows open.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know we've got loads of other stuff to talk about, but I did want to share. So I've been working on my side project on Dungeon Master, and I've gotten it to a certain point with permissions and stuff. And then I realized while I was like proving that I was able to grant permission to a second user to edit like the documents, that I needed to actually like implement collaboration features because
Mm,
otherwise, like, how would the other person know that you've edited the record while they're editing it? So I reached for YJS, which is a really cool tool, and it has integrations for the text editor I use. And then it came together pretty fast.
what
Um,
was it called? YJS? Like
yeah,
y.js?
y.js.
Hmm, interesting.
Um, it came together pretty fast. Essentially, it's using WebRTC under the hood, though you could also use a WebSocket provider, but I don't know. Like, anyway, there's pros and cons to both approaches. The con for me of a WebSocket provider is that you need to host that. It's a little server that runs and handles the communication,
Yeah.
whereas WebRTC, though it has limitations, it's really only a presence server that's needed, and there's a lot of public servers for that.
Yeah.
So for a small number of users at a time, I think it's a good middleman solution. Anyway, I got that set up. I got that kind of working. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff about like, how do you persist this to the database? I've already got that working. How does this integrate with NGRX? And then just before we went in the call, I got it working where I, I mean, I can show you if you want, but essentially when, I don't know how to explain this because there's too many new topics, but I've gotten it working where I can make a change in one of the documents that the second user doesn't have open,
Uh-huh.
and the first user can make that change, and then the NGRX action gets dispatched on the second user's device as a side effect,
Yeah.
which I think is like that's mind blowing.
That's
So
interesting. But
yeah,
let me stick back with the context here a little bit. Like just what is YJS? Because I'm looking at it
okay.
and it's not completely apparent. But I do see so you're using Prose Mirror as your editor, correct? Or
Technically, I'm using TipTap, but
oh,
TipTap is
okay.
built on top of Prose Mirror.
I see. Okay. So is this like a collaboration, live collaboration inside of an editor
Yeah.
kind of idea?
Do you want me to share my screen? I can show you the end
Yeah,
result.
go for it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think as soon as you start sharing, I can switch it out with mine.
Yeah, I think so too. Do the entire screen, and I'll just collapse these down and put them side by side. Of course, then I'll immediately lose track of which one is which, but okay. All right, I need to collapse this sidebar, but okay, in the meantime, it's fine. So on the left-hand side, I have the user, my main user, that's me, that's the initial creator of all this content.
Yeah.
And then on my
So
right-hand
maybe
side,
just
yeah, go
for
ahead.
new folks, Evan, this is your side project, right? The
Oh, right.
Dungeon Mastery, which in case you haven't seen it before, I think is really cool.
Yeah,
I'm not a RPG guy or whatever you call it, Dungeons and Dragons guy that much. I did like one
yeah.
campaign with my friends at my last job because we were a bunch of nerds and I wanted to nerd out with them. but I never really got into it. But this seems like such a cool tool, and like as you can see there on your screen, it's like a note taking app essentially for DMs. But I guess
Yeah.
like any kind of player could use it. But as you can see, it's like this editor. But as you're editing, you can like put in these tags, and each one of those pieces of text highlighted with the circle or with the square there is its own like entry, and they all have their information associated with it, so you can keep track of everything going on. So yeah, Dorothy Gale there, a young
Uh-huh.
human girl from Kansas. This must be an Oz-based Dungeons and Dragons. Well, what's the proper name for this? It's not a Dungeons and Dragons session. It's like is it a role
I
playing
mean,
session or?
yeah, I guess the generic term for anything that it could be is a TTRPG, so a tabletop role-playing game.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, uh, it, it doesn't even have to be session based if you don't want it to be. I've seen some people that are using the app that only use the record functionality. So they've
Mm,
got they kind of ignore players, I think, and they just do locations and NPCs and creations and history, and they basically build up a wiki, if you like, but it's in a very specific context. So if you are looking at, the Yellow Brick Road, that's
mm,
going to be a thing because it has tangible value, perhaps, and maybe it makes more sense as a location, but it spans multiple things, whatever. Then it is linked by notes to the Land of Oz itself, which
okay.
has links to all these other things, or rather, these things on the right are linking into this one, and
Yeah.
it could link back out as well. So it's a wiki, but it's like a scaled down wiki. It's not
Yeah.
super
Well,
detailed.
it
Yeah,
almost seems more like a web, like the way all these things tie themselves
yeah,
together. And so it's like a
yeah.
way of
It is.
visualizing that web.
It is a knowledge graph. It is my
Yeah.
take for a specific use case on a what is it, PKS, something like that, personal knowledge graph. The idea is like Rome Research, and I'm sure there's other tools now.
Yeah.
They use this sort of thing, and it always felt really unintuitive to me to type something like, "Here's this ID, and here's the thing I want." I never could
Yeah.
get my head around that.
I
You can
hear
do that
you.
in like Obsidian and things like that, but I do know the shortcut for at when I want to mention someone. Uh, and so I was
Yeah.
like, well, let me
That's
just
pretty
use that.
intuitive.
Yeah, exactly. Use that to build up, and then I can link to different records. And once I've linked to that record, you can then access that record's details and type it and link back to another player or creator and jump over to them and back and forth. So it becomes this sort of nice, intuitive setup
Yeah.
and system.
Yeah, let me switch to my
But yeah,
screen real quick because this reminded me of something I had to look up
oh,
recently. This is
but
this.
before you do, I just want to
Oh,
show
I can
you
switch it back.
just want to show you what the YJS is. So you see how Evan Future on the right and Good on the left have appeared as cursors.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
what this has enabled me to do
Oh, that is
is
so
have some
cool,
sort of
man.
presence and type stuff, and then it kind of syncs it between the two. So
Oh, that's
Google
so
Docs
cool.
style behavior. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does
So
get,
this
there's
is only for
bugs for me to
text
work out.
editors, yeah?
No, well, that's the other thing I was proving is it kind of is the whole thing. So essentially what it is right now is that the whole universe that we're within here, this top level that has the campaign and the records inside it,
Uh-huh.
you could switch to a different one. So I have this one has two universes. If I switched over here, all of these go away because they're not, this is this universe, whatever. But the point is that this whole thing is essentially a room. And
Got
as
it.
long as both of these are in the room, then YJS is tracking whatever changes I tell it to. Now, there's something built in specifically for these text fields. So if I'm in here and this one goes into, we can then like see each other. It's a little weird. There's bugs right now. I've only just started. Saving documents is weird. But if I make changes, the other side can see it, right?
Yeah.
What I was working on as well, though, is sometimes this needs to be done in the background. So
Mm.
this record is closed. This person is not viewing that, but some text that is maybe important here, such as I can change the name of Emerald City to Emerald City 2. If I'm looking at the main campaign where I've mentioned Emerald City, when I hit save on this, this one should update to the correct title, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to work, but let's see. it
No.
didn't work, but that's fine. That might be something else. But certainly the text change that I do here while this is closed should be working if I were to open that up. Yeah, see, it changed. It just took a second because I hadn't focused this. So
I
that
see.
communication of change, it was necessary for me to like do some weird dance with NGRX actions and all of that.
Yeah.
But it's almost working. Like I said, there's a bunch of bugs. You can take over screen sharing again if you want, but
Yeah.
I'm excited because it's starting to come together.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just showing this because I had just looked up that phrase you were talking about because my colleague Yuri had mentioned a PKM. I was like, "What in the world is a PKM?"
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, it's personal knowledge management. I found out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I use HackMD for this for my personal stuff. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, for ages, and I still use it. I use a thing called Workflowy, which is kind of just nested lists, and you can just dive deeper into each list as you go. I tried using Obsidian, I tried using Evernote years ago. I don't need all of the stuff that it provides, and I don't think in Markdown despite all these years. So for me, just having some text was enough.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, the thing that was frustrating to me about HackMD was just the lack of the full text search. But apparently,
Mm.
once you get the once you have a premium account, you can start doing the full text search. So that solved it for me, and
Nice.
happy to pay for a tool I'm using a lot as long as it's
Yeah,
helpful. So yeah, I think it was like $50 for a year's worth of membership or
it's not too
whatever.
bad.
Yeah, that's all right. I guess there's some free ones out there, but I've like
Yeah,
used Evernote and OneNote in the past, and they're just too clunky. So
yeah,
and they don't really do what I want them to. Versus HackMD feels like
yeah.
it's more intuitive. It's more what I want. There was a time for a while I had actually been using Excalidraw for most of my personal management's or personal knowledge stuff, but
Yeah.
it's interesting because like as you export this stuff, it actually goes out as like JSON, so you can search stuff specifically for
Hmm.
text if you wanted. But yeah,
Yeah,
um,
well, the, it's the cross-linking that was the thing that was missing with most of these for me.
mm,
You know, you if you have a linear style note-taking app and then you need to go back and look something up, yeah, you might be able to find it with search, but usually you also want it to reference something else, and then it just didn't work. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I hear you.
Hey, Happy New Year.
Ilgaz, how you doing, man? Happy New Year to you too. Anything going on for the new year for you, Evan? That seems like a topical thing to discuss.
No, not really. You know, we family just kind of hangs out and celebrates. We'll probably watch some movie at some stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the Russian tradition. There's a movie called The Irony of Fate, which is long and slow but funny as well. We usually put that on in the background. Yeah.
What's the
What
name
about
of
you?
this movie?
It's called The Irony of Fate. Um,
This sounds super heavy.
No, no, it's very funny. It's the Soviet era, and they were literally poking fun at the Soviet era, where the main character is living in Moscow, and he goes out to the bathhouse with his friends, and he never drinks, but they convince him to drink, and so he gets like just completely wasted, and then for some reason, I think he like goes onto the plane with his friend, but he's like just drunk, so he doesn't even notice. He takes a taxi and he gives the address of a place, but he's in St. Petersburg now. But because of the Soviet era, like all the streets have the same names and the building has the same like address. So he goes to the apartment building in St. Petersburg that has the same address as his place in Moscow. He goes up to the apartment and into the apartment, and his key works in the door. This idea of the conformity of the Soviet era making everything the same. So it's
So
that.
this is a Soviet comedy. Yeah?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Wait, are
Yeah.
you watching it in Russian or is it
Yeah,
translated?
we watch it in Russian and there's subtitles. I've seen it
Oh,
like,
okay.
many years. My wife and I have been married for quite a long time. So,
Yeah. Nice. That's wild, man. I had no idea. I would have thought the Soviet the Soviet Union would have had comedies. It doesn't seem in line with
The
them.
Soviet, the Soviet Union's filmmaking was state approved at the very least and state funded. You could get away with
What?
some indie stuff, but mostly like if you were going to make a movie that got distributed, it had to be go through the state. Mosfilm was like it became private eventually, but during the Soviet era, it was the state funded thing. And there's a few directors in from that time period that got the funding and got away with sort of like poking fun at the Soviet. And you couldn't go too far, of course.
Man, that's got
But
to
the
be
other thing
so
about it,
nerve-wracking though.
maybe the other
Like
thing
that's
is
a whole
so many
different
of
kind
them.
of cancel culture. Like people
Mm,
complain about that here now, but that's like you say the wrong thing or you poke fun at the wrong person or hit it just slightly the wrong way. I guess that's been
yeah,
a thing throughout history is like I don't know, like the courtroom gesture.
yeah,
Yeah, that's that guy's
yeah.
always
It
in
is
danger.
absolutely that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
as a side effect as well, there's a lot of really sweet films that were made, not just comedies, but like I don't know. It's for me as an American, it was always the Russian after the during and after the Cold War, it was always so demonized,
Mm,
and I don't think that's any more true than the reverse would be true, right?
mm.
There's stuff that sucks, and there's stuff that sucks in the U.S. So it's interesting to go and look at these cultural things, and some of them, like I said, are very heartwarming. Um, I don't know, they just have a kind of sweet naivete about them. So
Yeah, that's neat.
yeah, good stuff.
That's a cool.
But what
That's
about
a
you?
really
What are you?
cool tradition to have. We, my family, we're suckers for you know New Year, New You kind of thing. So
Hmm,
I'm actually I don't have that much going on um, this year in terms of what we're trying to do. Maybe just like taking a fresh look at some of my systems, like we were talking about, like what's going on with personal knowledge management stuff.
right.
So yeah, I was just revamping how I don't know my system works. So I'm generally paper guy when it comes to note
Hmm.
taking. So uh, and I've always quipped that like if I had more resources, I would invest it in like a personal assistant who would just take these notes for me and put it into like some searchable form. Because writing
Right.
it down, I think just writing down a note, the act of doing so is one of the most important things. And
Hmm.
for whatever reason, doing that physically on paper seems to work best for me. But when I try to find it, the recall's not that good. If
Yeah.
there's an important note I want to find, and so text search is very important for that. So the ultimate system for me would be having handwritten notes and a personal assistant. I can have just type that up maybe into HackMD for me to find. So
Yeah.
it's always just a struggle of figuring out those things and um, like generally I just want to like plan out my day inside of my notebook and then keep notes as things go or set some kind of structure for like uh, what is immediately on my plate and what is
Right.
coming up next. So I
There's
feel
there's
like,
a
yeah, go ahead.
there's a really good book um, that's called How to Take Smart Notes, which sounds like very generic, um, but it goes into in detail sort of like the history behind oh, what is the guy's name? There's a certain note-taking philosophy that expanded. I'm scrolling through the PDF to see if I can find the name of it now. Um, but it is that you need to have some sort of like a slip box. You need to have a sort of like, I don't have to think about this. I just will put this here. And then part
Yeah,
of my day will be then sorting these into places. And then I
yeah,
also need a quick lookup system based off of that. And that's a whole bunch of stuff which you don't know the complexities of until you really get into it. And this guy, I guess it's Lerman. What's his first name? Niklas Luhmann. um, he had a whole system, and he just had like, 30 years of this, and he used it to write multiple like doctorate papers despite not having gone to university, and taking notes on sociology. And again, it had to be like, what makes a valuable note? How do you take that actual note? Like, what is this form of interest? And then afterwards, how do you categorize it based off of your interest? How do you find it?
Mm,
And this is all paper-based system as well. So I'm sure other people have studied it, but it's an interesting read regardless, to get you thinking of like, what do you plan to do with these notes over time? How important is it for you to access them? How do you shift and evolve with your interests as you grow into a different person? So
right.
yeah, kind of cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, is it called Quick Notes like Slack and Time's talking about? Or
Uh, no, um, Quick Notes is an app, I guess.
oh, okay.
Um,
I had not heard of that
yeah,
one. I thought maybe that was the name of a book or something. It was
no,
interesting.
how to take smart notes is the one that I've got open anyway in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah, yeah. I was looking at
And
that.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like my system semi works. It's just I feel like it can always be better, right?
yeah,
So I don't know. There's other stuff around that, just like in terms of resolutions, that I just end up thinking about. I actually like don't like the idea of New Year's having to be the catalyst for all this stuff,
yeah.
but it's a welcome, I guess, signal to be like, hey, maybe start going to the gym more. Like you were doing that pretty good for a while, and
Mm,
now it's more like a couple times a week when I get to it. So me
mm,
and my wife are looking at figuring out how we can get that back into the daily routine and stuff like that. I was watching an interesting video. Let me see. I had it in my notes here. I don't know if I found it on YouTube. Uh, I'm always kind of hesitant about that kind of stuff. Let me just throw it up on the screen here real quick. But this guy was talking about his thing is like negative energy that
yeah.
he talks about in this video. It's talking about like don't think about what you want for from the new year. Think about what you don't want. And like what would be a negative result from like the new year? Like what would that look like for you? Focus on that and then figure out how to not do that. I guess his point is living mindfully, and so
Yeah.
you're aware of like where your time's going and what you're doing with stuff. So it was kind
I'd,
of so I
mm,
came across this just wasting time on YouTube, right? So it was like, he knows where to hit you.
right.
But yeah, it was interesting. We'll drop
In
that
my
link.
experience, that's a little bit dangerous.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it
good if
seems
it's
like it would
coupled.
be.
Well, no, look, it's good when it's coupled with an equal understanding of what you do want.
Hmm.
But in my experience, if you're only thinking about things that you don't want, the universe will hear and give you that. Like the universe doesn't hear no, it doesn't hear the negative. It
Yeah,
just hears what thing you're focusing on. So it'll give you that,
yeah.
you know?
I
Um,
think I think there's absolutely truth to that. Like, I was talking with my wife a while ago about like what to do. We live in Arizona, so you have to know what to do if a sandstorm suddenly hits, which is a weird
right.
thing about living in Arizona. So apparently, I had always thought, okay, sandstorm hits. I'm used to a snowstorm up in growing up north.
Mm,
What you do is you put on your lights, and if you're stopped or you have to pull over or something, you put on your blinkers. Apparently,
mm,
they tell you, or they had told you at some point, not to do that because what happens is in a sandstorm, people will see the flashing lights and they'll gravitate towards them, and you end up getting in accidents a lot because of that.
mm,
Because kind of the same thing you're talking about. You're fixated on your attention's on that, and even though
right.
the attention is meant to be don't come near this, like we're stopped. Um, it ends up uh, just the attraction of having your attention on that apparently makes the dangerous situation worse. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I still feel like I'd still turn on my blinkers there, but it's an interesting thought for
Yeah, it
sure.
is. Yeah, I think that's interesting as well because it has a lot to do with, what impact you have on the people around you,
Yeah.
And a lot of people go through life being very unconscious of that and not paying any attention. And I don't know, it matters a lot. This last year and the year ahead as well, I have a lot of focus on leadership
Hmm.
within our company. Like I came back in as a higher level than when I left. So like I started, or last year I left this company I'm working for, went off and worked for Kahoot for a while, and that was okay. But then I was missing a few things, so I came back to the same company. And being in a leadership position now has really been like, well, let's start to think about what that means, and reading a lot of good books and listening to a lot of good stuff.
Hmm.
But for me, it's turned out that, okay, yes, you do need to have a good understanding of yourself to do this, but a lot of us are already in positions of leadership, whether it's because you're in a partnership and you have certain responsibilities within that, or you are collaborating with some people on something and you have more knowledge in one area than the others do. Little bits and pieces, but people look to you to take the lead on something. Guess what? You're already a leader. So coming from that point of view, then, and saying like, well, we need to get people to embrace that. And it has a lot to do as we're discovering, as we're workshopping this, we're starting a sort of mentorship program. And as we're
Hmm.
workshopping this, we're discovering that a lot of what it has to do with is that we need to teach them to embrace that, which means we need to embrace that, which means we need to be like mindful of how we're interacting with the people around us.
Right.
um, it's fascinating, and I don't know. It's a lot of people I've heard have had a really tough year this year. For me, it was the previous year, but I can absolutely understand that. For
Yeah.
me, this hasn't been, and I think it has primarily been because I've put the focus on just like what does my wife call it? She calls it like a positive mental diet.
Yeah.
It's easy to dwell in, oh, I wish this were different. I wish I could change this. This is stopping me. This external thing is what's keeping me from progressing. But switching that and say, if that's the case, guess what? You don't have control over that. Yeah. So don't stress on too much of that. It's not pure positive mindset, but it is saying just take ownership of the thoughts you're having and the things that are happening to you and how you react to them. So the reaction in particular becomes the focus of, am I going to let this destroy me for the day? Or am
Yeah.
I going to say, well, shit, that sucks, but maybe there's this good thing? Or
Yeah.
I don't want to react too strongly to this. I would rather react strongly to good news than react strongly to bad news. I will downplay that in myself if possible, and then continue to move forward towards what goals I want to achieve, the bigger, brighter picture, the nicer version of myself. So it's hard. It doesn't always work. You get
Yeah.
low blood sugar some days and you
Well,
know.
we could get weirdly philosophical here. Let's try that for a little bit because I don't know. It's kind of fun sometimes. But so there's the it's sort of like the famous metaphor of like Socrates in the cave. Are you familiar with that? And
Yeah.
so it's there's we're in a cave. I don't know. Are you bound or something? So you can't like move around freely, but you can see reflections of stuff. You can see the shadows that things cast on the wall of the cave, right?
Right.
You can't see the object themselves. Or you can't see the object that's casting the shadow itself, and that's I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what ideas are sort of like. Like we can't see
Yeah.
the idea itself, or I think it goes into like the world of forms, where the form is like the actual real thing that our
Yeah.
idea is a reflection of. So we a limitation of like our processing power or something is being lacking the ability to see that object itself, but we can look at the reflection of it and we can sort of communicate in the reflection of it too. Like that's
Right.
sort of what speech is trying to it's really casting its own shadow of our perception of that shadow, but sharing that with someone else. And I don't know, ideas are tricky stuff, and just
Yeah.
figuring out how to deal with that, how to manage that yourself, but also how to communicate it is like extremely interesting to me. And I don't know, uh, the, the effects of ideas on you too, like
Mhm.
your relationship to ideas, like our identity. I think often becomes tied to certain ideas,
Yeah.
and I'm like still wrestling myself with like how do I do that? Should I be attaching myself to an idea, or like a point of personal virtue for me is never being so attached to a certain idea
Right.
that I would never discard it. You know,
Yeah.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson actually mentioned this when he's asked about tattoos. He'll always say, I never want to get a tattoo because I never want any one idea to be so central to me that I would never throw it out."
Yeah.
Which I think that's a really admirable way to go about life. So I don't have any
I like,
tattoos either. I don't.
no.
Maybe I want one at some point. I don't know. I'm not. I don't want to be too attached to the idea of never getting a tattoo
Yeah, exactly.
either.
No, I know where he's coming from. I always wanted a tattoo, but I never got one because I could never justify that connection, right? It was like,
Yeah.
what do I like? Okay, sure, The Legend of Zelda,
Mm.
like I could get the Triforce somewhere.
Somewhere
I
the sun don't
very,
shine.
yeah, etc. And I had some joke ones and things like that. There were
Yeah.
philosophies I espoused, but it was one of those like, do I espouse that philosophy so deeply that I want it to be a part of me forever? Things change, I change, like who knows? There is an aspect of it though, which I admire, which is you are accepting of yourself at the time that you are, you know, saying like, this is very important to me now. And even if that changes down the line, I will happily embrace a reminder that this is how I thought back then, by having it there forever. So there's that. But like, people's names.
Evan, I'm
Oof,
sorry. I think I lost you for a second
oh,
there, just with my internet connection. You were talking about the Legend of Zelda. Oh,
oh no, I
before I
was
lost
just
you.
saying that I admire people that do get tattoos because there is an aspect of embracing something that they felt very strongly about at the time.
Hmm.
And that acknowledgement that yes, they might change and grow and shift later, but that's still in their past. You don't let go of your past just by moving forward and growing. Um, I like that as well. A lot of what my wife and I have been processing through lately is just things that used to feel bad or that we were ashamed of or that we had a mindset of negativity towards in ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like our inner voice, like criticizing ourselves for something that we would do in our past and being like, you know what, though? What would you have done differently? The information you had, like, there's two aspects. Like, you didn't have enough information, so you made a poor decision. Or you had enough information and you went against the sort of inner code and you made a poor decision. Either one of those cases you can probably find some forgiveness for as you go forward. Um, I don't know. It Finding what those moments are for me is actually hard because I tend to just be like, oh shit, I made a mistake and I'll move forward.
Right.
But um, she's the type that will dwell on things.
Mm.
I think different personalities, right? But I don't know. I mean, we are getting philosophical. I do feel like the most important thing in the universe is the present moment, the current understanding that you have and acting upon that. And the stuff that happened in the past for sure, matters and happened and you shouldn't deny it, but it isn't as important as what is happening right now. And the future also is not as important as what is happening right now, you know.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that for the most part.
Mm.
Maybe
Yeah, we
pop it
can.
back up the stack to the original the video that kind of sparked all this. I think the guy's point was quite interesting, that there's a lot of power in those negative energy, or the negative thoughts of like what you don't want your year to look like.
Yeah.
Um, which I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a fire. Like in a pad context, that fire will burn your house down. But if you're able to control that and you have, you know, good mastery over it, you can use it to cook a meal. So figuring out how to do that, maybe don't mess with fire if you're not ready for it. So
Yeah.
like I said, I'm very cautious of taking on uh, those things full heartedly, just wholly accepting using
Yeah.
negative energy for that kind of stuff. Especially like to your wife's point, like I think the positive mental diet that's a real thing. Uh, I think. I think that
Yeah.
those kind of things will manifest. So I feel like don't spend too much on it, but
Yeah.
uh, it would be interesting to experiment with it. I'll let you know maybe next week what
Yeah.
I end up doing with that idea, or if I use it at all or not. So, but anyways, I did want to mention for New Year's I have so I had put out a tweet. I really want to get better at videos in the new year,
Mhm.
and it sounds like for the next cycle, at least over at NX, I'll be focusing on DevRel, which is like a little bittersweet moment for me. Like I want to be an engineer. That's who I am. That's who I want to be. But
Yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time on making YouTube videos, and in November I had taken vacation time from NX to focus on doing my own course with Supabase. I told you about,
Yeah.
and that was all like really positive experiences. And I'm looking forward to actually like focusing on content creation. I actually cringe whenever I hear
Well,
that phrase. I don't want to be a, I don't know what a content creator is. That sounds so grandiose and kind of bullshit. I just
yeah.
like making videos. that's, that's the way I like to talk about it. But I guess, like, you know, DevRel is more than that too. But, um, yeah. Uh, in any case, I'm very interested too in like, you know, we're doing one now, but using live streams to kind of uh, generate interest, generate content. So one of the things we had talked about last time we talked, we weren't on a live stream, but just talking about like having a going back to it, being an engineer, having like a daemon running
Right.
in the background of your mind as you're having these conversations to just stop, set some context for where you're at. Like, so we're talking about, you know, content creation and making videos, but also how we can use like take like a section of a live stream and section it off so that you can make a clip out of
Yeah.
that, right? Um,
Yeah. Like what we were talking about was we had deviated in the side note and went and explored some code, etc. But we like there was a patch in that where it was very interesting, but the setup for it, the context of why you would want to find this interesting was like 3 minutes before in the live stream. And
right.
so the idea was that we need that internal process of whoever it is, and in your case it'll be you, the host of the show, needs their host of the stream needs to be responsible for being like, wait, let's ignore the fact that there is a live stream going, or rather say, let's repeat ourselves,
Yeah.
set the context, and then go into the rest of the natural flow of the conversation. So the attempt to like break into that flow briefly, but in the service of these clips that you can find.
Right. I think some of that is, like I said, reiterating context here, but a piece of that too, I think, is the set and setting of the conversation too. So like
Yeah.
maybe resetting that and just having a fresh palette for, you know, hey, we're going to talk about something new here. So I attempted to do that at the start of
Yeah.
this section. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that needs more practice from me and figuring out a little bit more. But I'm looking forward to figuring out just, you know, what that looks like for me, and yeah, how we can maybe try to build something up. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of a
I think
following, in
that's
terms of skill set. It's really that piece itself is especially exciting for me. My time in November, I had mentioned taking time off to look at Supabase
Yeah.
was really interesting for me because a lot of my professional work has been all centered on JavaScript. And um, I feel like there's a level of mastery I've achieved there. So, like,
Mhm.
you come across new packages like YJS, we had been looking at earlier, that are just like, okay, here's a new API to learn,
Yeah.
but it's it's never you never find something so weird that you're like, oh, I've never seen that. It's been a while since I've encountered something like that in like the realm of JavaScript, where I just like, I don't know what to do with this.
Right.
And when I was during November, I was having those moments all the time because I was having to go back into Postgres, which I've had
Mhm.
experience with. Like I'd say I've had like 2 years of professional experience with altogether, but just hadn't touched it in a while and just like don't know how to do some of the new stuff. And like the syntax itself is
Mhm.
just bizarre to me at times, right?
Yeah.
Like how
Yeah.
closely it approaches natural language while clearly not being a natural language
Yeah.
is, yeah, in SQL. That's nuts to me.
Yeah. I think it's great, but I'm not that interested in delving too deep into it. I'm grateful that they've exposed and they've improved their type safety within, or TypeScript within the Superbase JavaScript package,
Yeah.
because going in and writing Postgres stuff, not super into.
Yeah. I think I've showed you this before, Evan, but this
Yeah,
is just wild to me. This is like the syntax for creating a table, and oh man.
yeah, going in with no prior knowledge, not quite understand, like only having seen JavaScript and coming to this is just like,
Yeah.
oh,
This is so
okay, what do the
obtuse to
brackets
me.
mean? Yeah,
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 just trying to figure out what's going on here. What does the ellipsis mean? What do these
yeah,
brackets versus nested brackets mean? What's an
yeah,
ellipsis along with something else in a bracket? What's a bracket comma? I
yeah,
have
bracket
no clue.
comma. And then why do some of these have like, or and then an italic thing? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Even some of the more basic stuff, like why is this? What's the? There's clearly supposed to be a difference between all caps and not all
yeah,
caps, right?
yeah,
That's that one I felt like I had unpacked a little bit. A lot of this is still a mystery to me. But apparently, like things don't have to be all caps or caps when it comes to these specific syntax, specific words like create.
no,
But it's
yeah,
more like a convention that people will use that
convention,
to signify, oh, this is part of the syntax versus you would use like not fully caps when you're
right?
talking about like a table name or something like that. But you can also use
Yeah,
double quotes for that purpose. Specifically, if you have like something, a table name that is case sensitive. Anyways, there's all kind of like weird SQL Postgres stuff going on here. But the point,
yeah,
maybe going back to the original point, is there's a whole new set of things to learn here. And that was the most exciting piece of my time spent with Supabase and learning in that thing. I'm really
yeah.
excited
Feels good.
to do the same thing with cringing again just saying it, but content creation or like
Okay.
figuring out YouTube. I feel like is
Yeah,
a big piece of that. Figuring out what makes a good video. Like, and there's so many dimensions to this too.
yeah,
Um, like one of the things I had come across lately. Do you know who Matt Pocock is by any chance,
yeah,
Evan?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's doing like total TypeScript now, but if you look him up on YouTube, let me pull him up here real quick. Um, oh look, there's us.
Yeah, it's us.
Look at us, two good-looking guys, if I do say so
Oh boy.
myself. But here we go. Yeah, so Matt's got two channels, both with suspiciously similar subscriber counts, which is interesting.
Mhm.
But his original channel, this is his old one, is him doing voice coaching, which
Ah,
is wild to me.
that's great. I can do that too.
Yeah, he's got all these. He's got like if you look at these are significant hitters. Like this is half a
Yeah.
million views over here for like a Scottish accent, over a half a million for a New York accent. I was looking at this one the other
Oh,
day.
hey, I was doing New York accent.
Yeah,
It's great.
well, I think he talks about his R's here, but there's like
Look at
a
this guy.
clear. There's a yeah. Hey, I'm walking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But
So
anyways,
cool.
he's got like this whole career of like voice coaching. I don't know if it's like I actually don't not familiar with the space enough to know whether it's like for voice acting or if it's mainly for singing. Like I don't know this world. But that's like such an interesting dimension of like the whole thing
Hmm.
of making YouTube videos. If we go to like his other his more recent stuff, he's talking about, he's working on Total TypeScript. So plug in that. That seems like a
Yeah,
really cool product.
it
I
really
haven't been
is.
too interested in it because I feel like I've already spent a lot of that investment of learning a lot of that stuff. But he's
Yeah,
like some of his more recent videos are on some of the newer things, so I'll check out his YouTube videos for sure. And I feel like his voice just does so much lifting in terms of setting this really cool environment, a really cool like
yeah,
setting for the stuff he makes. So yeah,
yeah. I think it does really well. What I like seeing, and I like it seeing in you and other people in the community, is a slow pivot. It doesn't have to happen right away, but people that are
mm,
willing to, again, not be beholden to one particular topic for the rest of their careers. I worry about some people that are super in one camp and it'd be like, oh, I will only ever, let's, say like produce React-based content. And if Svelte comes along, I'll be like, no, I'll never be experienced with that. Because you don't know what it's going to shift to. For a long time, that was the case for me for the front end stuff.
mm,
And lately, this past year, I've really, because of my side project, started getting into more of the back end stuff of it's a really different mindset. What is efficiency on the back end versus what is efficient on the front end? On the front end, you want smaller data. You want to not repeat yourself. On the back end, it doesn't matter if you repeat yourself as much because your file size doesn't matter,
yeah,
right? So if you duplicate the same function twice because it just speeds up your workflow, et cetera, it's not the
yeah,
end of the world.
yeah.
What is
Bundle
the end of the
time don't
world is if you're,
mean shit
yeah,
when it comes to back end
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, but it's such a weird mindset from coming from the front end.
Yeah.
You're unnecessarily optimizing certain things because you're used to doing that in the front end, and on the back end is different. So I've been growing and learning there, but also like this whole Mid-Journey AI generative art, which by the way, the emerging term for it is synthography, which
Oh
is
wow.
hilarious.
What? How do you
Um,
spell that?
as you think, synthography, so like photography, but
Oh,
synth,
okay. Like
like
synth.
synthesizer. Yeah, synthography. Um, which is whatever. But it is that thing of like, how do you get?
My
I
spell
have
checker
this
doesn't like it.
instinctive. No, of course
It's
not.
too
I
new.
have this instinctive urge to get better at it. I'm like,
Yeah.
I typed in, you know, cat, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. I typed in cat with butterfly wings, and they gave me a cat and a butterfly. Well, that's not
Yeah.
what I wanted. How do I trick it into doing this? And you find these things. Okay, that's that style, but it's not a consistent style. How do I get consistency out of this?
Yeah.
So it's a learning curve, right?
Well, I had seen stuff. I don't know if this was a meme or not, Evan, but I saw job postings for AI
Yeah,
prompting or
yeah,
being an AI prompter. I was like,
yeah.
that's weird. You really need someone
Consider,
to do
yeah,
that?
you do. I mean, like, and it has to be someone that stays on top of it because it's going to change every few
Yeah.
months as well. Notion has their Notion AI, which essentially just uses GPT-3 under the hood, same thing that ChatGPT is based on. And they've had someone on their team that's created prompts that will convince GPT-3 to give the correct formatted response, like in Markdown, to what
Mhm.
the person like asks for. So there's like this middleman of massaging prompts as well.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. But anyway, I
That's
just use it as an
wild.
example of like continually learning and growing, and that being the thing that we're actually engaged and excited in, not whatever we've been doing for the past 6 months.
Yeah. that's interesting. Over the pandemic, like pandemic
Mm,
proper back in 2020, we had taken our kids out of school too,
yeah.
to get them homeschooled, and our younger boy Luke, he really liked that actually because he's really smart. He's really quick, especially. And he feels like going to school, he's always held back, and so we
Mm,
were looking at the possibility of maybe bringing him back to homeschooling because he had done so well in it before, and he's just pretty responsible too. But one of the things that is most interesting to me about the prospect of him doing homeschooling is giving him more reps in learning how to teach yourself something,
right.
which like like you said, that's kind of what this job is. It's not you're not
Yeah.
so much learning how to prompt GPT chat now. It's more like you are on a continuous journey to evolve as the tools evolve to figure out how these things work. And that's
Yeah.
like in some weird way that's I feel like that's what our job as developers is to do
It
is
is.
like it's not just that oh I learned JavaScript. I've mastered that now. No, like that's not going to be around forever. I actually think JavaScript will have a very long shelf life. I think will
Yeah.
take me to the end of my career. We'll see. But I do think that like in terms of like learning a framework, I don't think Angular or React will be perennial favorites. Those are the two I've invested the most time into.
Mm,
So just like learning how to learn, whatever framework comes next is going to be big, or even like learning how to figure out which framework to try to learn.
yeah.
Maybe a very valuable skill set too. Um, so
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I had over the past few months, uh, I had taken up like the responsibility for being tech lead on a project at work,
hmm
which meant that this seemed like a very front end heavy project. So it made sense already for me to be the lead, but I needed I don't know. It just felt like it was so front end heavy that maybe we could also use our back end with JavaScript or TypeScript.
yeah,
And then the choice came up of what is the best technology to write our back end in? Is it GraphQL or is it kind of like just an Express thing or a Lambda, whatever that maybe we could use something like TRPC, which
yeah.
is a specific technology that's it's
It's
not
actually
much, but it
super interesting to me that all the options you've described are inside of the JavaScript world too for the backend. Which
well, that was the thing. I was like, I'm going to be doing this,
okay, so given
or at
that, you would
least,
definitely reach for JavaScript for sure.
yeah, the other choice would have been maybe Java. But in my experience, the kind of flexibility and speed with which you wanted to work, I was like, I don't know if that's going to be beneficial to our team.
Right.
uh, and this type of project we're working on. But so specifically, so I already had some constraints placed upon it. So it really was just a question of GraphQL or TRPC. And then it was a bit of a battle to be like, I know what my instinct is here, but what is the actual correct answer? And how can I explain this in a way that everyone else will get on board as well? And it was a bit of a learning curve because, like I said, when I had the instinct, that doesn't mean I understood it. It was
Yeah.
just a good leaning. But that you have a responsibility as you're growing to be like, okay, let's investigate this. How did I even know that TRPC was on the table in this particular case? All of my stuff before had just told me GraphQL,
Right.
but it was, gosh, what annoys me about GraphQL because I'd tried it is that I have to run a code gen to get types into my front end. And I was like, there's got to be someone that's come up with an option so that I don't have to do that. Or what else is there as an option? And
Yeah.
then this came up as one of those searches.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah. In the end, I won that argument, and it made perfect sense for the type of project we're building, where we don't need a backend for everyone. We need a backend for just our front end client, so BFF layer. And
Yeah.
in that case, GraphQL is overkill. Like GraphQL is all things to anyone. you know. That's not what we want. We want
Yeah.
one thing for one person.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I hear you. I actually, I've cooled down a good bit on GraphQL, especially in the last year. Um, I feel like its place is almost like to have a DSL or a specific DSL, but like essentially it's just like a broker for how to
mm,
interact with other APIs that you have to write yourself. I feel
yeah.
like, which is fine. Like maybe that works for some use cases, but um, for a lot of things like if I'm thinking about like, well, how do I communicate with the database? I feel like some of the contexts I've used GraphQL with in the past as well. I'm just going to put it. It's essentially putting a GraphQL layer on top of like
Right.
a Mongo database or a Postgres database or something like that. So I mean, there's not that much different when you're doing that between writing a uh, your own GraphQL layer for how to get these different entities versus just like using a client for you that's
Yeah.
specific for
So
that
so
database
the thing
out of
that
the box.
the thing that I understood after a while was that GraphQL was developed for a a tremendous amount, like a very specific, like really complex set of data structures that were
Right.
so complex and nested and interconnected and et cetera,
Yeah.
that to write any kind of REST API for that would have been a nightmare of hundreds of thousands of endpoints. And their clients that were consuming this data did need that many endpoints. They wanted the
Right.
ability to put these things together in such a minute form. And yes, you could have maybe done parameterization of these routes, etc. But it just made more sense to create something like this, which became a large aggregate. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
anything new
Yeah.
that came in, it was also available,
Yeah. No,
which
I
makes
I,
sense for
I agree
Twitter, right?
100%. I feel like a GraphQL layer makes a lot of sense where it's acting as a true aggregator. Excuse me,
Yeah,
between a whole set of different data sets. But I feel
yeah,
like most of the time you're not. At least the times I've used GraphQL, I'm usually not using it in that context. I'm usually using it
yeah,
because I want to put it in front of one specific uh, uh, data source, and
yeah,
in the sense where you have like n different data sources and or n different APIs or n different ways of getting data. I definitely see GraphQL as a helpful way of conforming all of those down to one specific interface or one specific format or one specific pattern for how to get that data and pull it down where you don't need to know how each one of the different data sources work. That
yeah,
makes a lot of sense, but I have never used it in that context. I'm not like it seems like it's particularly good for like this sort of microservice world where like
yeah,
everything lives by itself and each thing has its own weird different implementation or different
yeah.
interesting things about it. GraphQL seems like a great way of just black boxing all of that, so you don't need to remember or you don't need to know how all those things work. But
Yeah, like
yeah,
again, it comes down to who is using this thing that you're building. And I see a lot of people that are building an app. So they're building one thing that can be used and they use GraphQL. And it just feels like, well,
yeah, I
I
feel like at
don't
that
see
point
that
you're
as,
abstracting for the point of
yeah,
abstracting, which
exactly. You're
coming
abstracting
from
for the point of
Angular, I feel
abstracting.
like coming from Angular and having going away from Angular, I feel like I'm specifically allergic to. I feel like that's rampant, actually,
Right.
in Angular
Yeah.
specifically. But
Really.
I think it's
Mm.
it's rampant in a lot of engineers. We like abstractions. That's fun
Yeah.
for us. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, trying to avoid doing that lately of just saying like, look, get this done, find a second use case, then abstract. You repeat yourself until you are confident in the pattern. And it saved me a couple of
yeah,
times recently where I've been like, ah, that's not what I needed to build at all. I'm glad I didn't prematurely abstract this.
yeah.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah, well, going along with like, so teaching yourself how to learn,
Yeah,
I feel like there's definitely a siren song there, where learning is really fun. At least for me, I feel like it is for a lot of engineers too. I feel like that's why we're
yeah,
here. But there's dangers of that, and there's also a lot of value in like knowing. when to stop and just get things done.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like this is actually uh what we're getting paid to do, right? Like this is what we want to
Right.
do. We want to teach ourselves how to learn and learn new things, but this is where we're actually producing value. This is where we just stop
Right.
and get stuff done. So you do need to have enough to be able to get things done relatively efficiently. But I feel like I am definitely guilty of this, where I will just sit and sharpen my axe forever. I'll be like, oh man, when I get done sharpening this
Yeah.
axe, those trees better watch out because here I
Yeah.
come. But in the meantime, like there's a such thing as being sufficiently sharp, and figuring
Yeah.
out how to optimize those things between those two of like learning new
Well,
things and getting more efficient. I feel like goes on the side of the table too. Getting more efficient. I feel like a lot of the struggle is like this optimization between those two things. So
yeah. My anecdote for that is this last week I was trying to get um so in this new model, I don't know, maybe I just lucked out in that the first version of my side project, everything that you could create was inside a campaign. So you had a campaign that wrapped around your players, your NPCs, and your sessions. And that made it very simple to sort of like not grant people access, but at least grant read access, put it behind a password and people could just access it. But in this new version, it's a lot more complex. And as I was developing, like, okay, I want to be able to grant access as a user, I want to be able to grant access to someone to be a co-owner, essentially, a co-editor of the whole universe that we're in. But I also need to be able to grant individuals access to certain records that they can be edit and take their own notes and be the prime maintainer of. And then
mm-hmm.
I've also got a billing contact and all this other stuff. And then I started developing this and it just was hard. And I got it to a point where it finally all linked up data structure wise and I found the right simplification. But then I had I had this moment where I was like, oh, I need to send an email if I invite them. So if I've added them, say like you should be a person, I'll need to then create a user that is in a temporary status and then send an email to them specifically. But post uh, Superbase doesn't have that out of the box, as in they have a generic like invite, but that's not what I need. I need a little more, and I need a hook on the way back. And I was like, stop. I started looking into SendGrid to figure out, or Send in Blue to figure out like how to customize the emails and transactional emails. And I was like, no, 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 you don't need to do this now. Let's get everything worked out because for all you know, you might change the way this works by the time you're finished. Don't do that now. Put it on the to-do list. Instead, like let's just hard code one portion of this journey here, which I did, which then in turn led to the realization that, oh crap, I now need to do some like actual collaborative like editors, which is its own can of worms. But you have to be able to stop at a certain point, right? You have to
Yeah.
say like, okay, yes, there's this interesting thing that needs to be done at some point, but if I stop to do this now, the bigger picture will never get finished because there's always more intricate things you can do in polishing the axe, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking of it totally more in terms of like as a personal engineer, but I can definitely see that for like features in a project as well.
Mm.
Like for your dungeon mastery one too. So like building up I feel like maybe this goes with like the idea of building up those abstractions, but you can do the same thing with building up uh you know make sure there's absolutely no code debt or whatever, so that oh man, when we finally start adding some more stuff, it's gonna go really good. It's gonna go really well. But yeah, I I think it all comes down to just like figuring out how to optimize those things. I feel like
Yeah,
that's what we're humans are latently and subconsciously very good at. Um, Maybe not the best. Like there's a whole thing to like mathematically optimizing this versus our gut of how these things get optimized. But I feel like we're a lot of like us as humans is training that model just naturally and figuring out how to do those things. So
Yeah.
so yeah. Anywho, we've been going at it for an hour here, Evan. Uh, I
Yeah.
think we probably wrap it up here. But this was
Sounds
fun.
good.
This was a good conversation. We went philosophical, we went practical, we went all over the place. Thanks for showing us YJS in particular. That looks the demo you showed there at the beginning. Do you want to maybe show us that one more time, just to wrap it up? Because
Uh,
oh man, that was so cool. Just being able to show like the Google Docs style cursors where you can see the other person uh,
yeah.
doing stuff as you're going. I am looking forward to maybe for our next stream we can just do it all inside of live collaboration on Dungeon Mastery. I don't know.
Yeah. I again, I do also think that's pretty freaking wild. Oh, there's
Yeah.
something freaking out here. Let me refresh the
It's,
pages. Um, it's really interesting that it works, and it's not that much code. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, there, those are working, and then I can just type stuff in.
Yeah.
I
Evan,
mean, if you want to see, yeah, go
just to
ahead.
maybe throw something out there really quick. Have you ever thought about just pivoting this project a little bit and like throwing out the idea of hard coded sections, like the players and the locations and the NPCs, and just making it all generic? Because I feel like
I
you would
have,
legitimately have an
yeah,
awesome PKM system here. That would be specific to TTRPGs. That would be amazing to work with. But
maybe. I like the idea of um, giving people some constraints, which then develops their creativity. So a blank page is really tough to choose what to
yeah,
draw, but if you give them like a few extra lines, you can find meaning or find interesting things within those lines.
right,
So that's always been my philosophy. In the first iteration, I realized we had nothing for history, and initially this was items, but it didn't leave space for monsters. But it's like I'm not like I don't see what other categories there would be within this space, and I don't see that this product is that different from existing knowledge graph systems um, that already exist. But we'll see. You know, anything could happen over time. Right now,
yeah,
it's just a little messy. I did want to show you, like, this is all that has code-wise has taken to get this set up
hmm
um, for YJS. So I have a service that's a singleton. Um, when it loads up, I create a new Y doc, and uh, I create a provider observable to subscribe to. And whenever a particular user changes their universe, which is the sort of like the room level,
right.
um, I will destroy the existing one for them and destroy the doc as well, and then create a new doc. I'm not sure if I need to do this step. I guess I do. But then I'll create a new provider with the universe as the ID and the document. And then that essentially creates the room on the server, like the connection point, which isn't the room doesn't exist in the server, but it says, hey, there is a room called this that will be broadcasting
Right.
events. And then when I have, for example, when peers are added or removed, I'm updating another one to say like how many people are in the room. So and this is going to get hard to see, but as I move around, I'm sort of echoing or console logging out how many people are currently active.
Right.
And then I'm going to use that to control who's actually saving the notes. So basically, only one person should dispatch the actual server persistence call to the database, right? That's a step that's needed here to figure out. But
Interesting.
this is all that was needed to set up that communication and active presence of folks as well.
Yeah.
There's a bit of extra code which I'm doing to sort of persist other changes, so not just the current active record, but in the linked notes component, when I'm setting up the editor itself, so TipTap and ProseMirror, they have this collaboration plugin which lets me link up that document. The field is whatever the current one is. So within that document, there's a field that is the current record, and then there's this collaboration cursor. What I would say is I love this thing, and this is, I don't know, we don't need to share this necessarily, but you have a list of colors, and then you have a random function which takes the seed, but that is
Yeah.
a particular string. So the username in this particular case, and sorry, ignore that. Uh, this simple function here, which essentially like turns any string into the same, like the same thing every time.
Right.
So it's random, a random number, but it's not based just off of the count. It's based off of like a certain hash of that. So essentially, though, that means that the same username will get the same color every time, which I
Yeah, it's
quite like.
deterministic.
Yeah, I love that. I love those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I don't have to act, they don't I don't have to set up that you choose your color. You just get one, but you'll always get the same one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's pretty
and
cool.
it's pretty cool. Again, people have done the heavy lifting, standing on the shoulders of giants here.
Yeah.
But there is a whole bunch of other stuff still to do. There's this weird bug that happens. Um, I think it'll be in this one with TRPC, where I don't, it's giving me a CORS error, but that makes zero sense. And I think it's that two calls are happening simultaneously and it freaks out and like denies one, but I got to figure out what's going on there. But I'll get it working eventually. It's
Yeah.
exciting. Um,
Corsairs are always the worst.
but I don't
Like,
think it's a real CORS error. You know, that it only happens if two people are connected, essentially, if this WebRTC thing is going. If I do it in the other way, nothing comes up. It works just fine. I can type as I want to.
right.
It's all good. It's just when two people are connected and only on the one that's hitting save. Again, I don't know. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thanks for coming on, Evan. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
watching. I guess we'll catch y'all next time.
Yeah. See you. See you next year.
See you in 2023.
Ciao.